What up, guys? Here with for my breakdown. I know Devin did two divisions for the AFC 2 days ago. I'm here to give you two from the NFC today. Doing the NFC East and South. Um, Devin's kind of gonna stick with the AFC. I'm gonna stick with the NFC. We're gonna kind of do our combined little balls deep Super Bowl prediction kind of. He's gonna come out with his conference champion at the end. I'm gonna come out with mine for the AFC and NFC together, basically. So to start, I'm gonna start with the NFC East today. We got the games coming up in like another 45 minutes, so I'm gonna try to get this out there, obviously, in time for you guys to be able to watch it at least at some point during today or even tomorrow, and so you can see my breakdowns, before we get too deep into the season. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the NFC East, and I'm going to talk first about the Cowboys, which is my pick for division winner of the NFC East. Hate to say it as a Giants fan. I hate the Cowboys, but it's what's realistic. I mean, they're the best team on paper. I almost don't know where to start when it comes to the Cowboys. They're such a talented team. I mean, we know that Dak is capable of throwing, 4,500 yards plus every season. He throws, he threw 4,900 last year. Obviously, they had two 1,000-yard receivers in Gallup and Cooper, almost three 1,000-yard receivers, and they only got better at that position. They added CeeDee Lamb with their first-round pick in the draft. And obviously, we know what Zeke is capable of. Zeke is always at the top of the running backs. Since he's gotten the league, he's been a top 3 running back in my opinion. Maybe I'm a homer because I love Zeke, especially being an Ohio State fan. He's an Ohio State alum, so he can go no wrong for me in terms of play. And so for me, that offensive side of the ball, especially considering, they're always so talented at the offensive line position. Dak has all the time in the pocket to throw the ball to 3 really possible number 1 receivers. I mean, obviously, with that high-powered offense, it's easy to say that Gallup, maybe his numbers are, a little higher than they might be in any other offense. But still, I mean, to have a 1,000-yard season as a wide receiver is impressive. And like I said, with that offensive line, all the time in the pocket to throw, Zeke, all the space in the world to run, it seems like every year this is the Cowboys division to lose. So we'll see. And that's why I gave them a ceiling of 12-4, 9-7. I know Devin, like I said, I know you guys, if you watched this video, you saw he gave him a record. I'm going to give him a ceiling and a floor. And so for me, the ceiling is 12-4. And their floor is 9-7. They also have on the defensive side of the ball, DeMarcus Smith, who I mentioned in a Defensive Player of the Year conversation if you've watched the latest episode, which if you haven't, go watch that. We talked about our Week 1 predictions for some of the key matchups and the yearly awards for the NFL. And so, like I said, DeMarcus Smith, who I mentioned for the Defensive Player of the Year, he's alongside Everson Griffin, Dontari Poe, a linebacker core, anchored by Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch. The only real questionable position for that team is their DBs, their secondary, which isn't really, they're not scrubs. They don't have, terrible players back there. It's just their talent there isn't obviously as, prominent as all those other positions. I mean, they're stacked everywhere else. So, like I said, it's gonna be tough. They got a lot of young guys at the secondary, but with guys like Brandon Carr and CJ Goodwin, who are vets, you almost have, the hope of even though we might not have those shutdown guys, we still have guys we know that can go in there and get the job done and at least hold receivers to minimum and not, going out there and our whole entire secondary getting burnt. At least we know if we're losing, it's because we're not as talented at the position and not because guys are missing assignments, especially with vets like that to kind of anchor down that position. So I don't know, the NFC East feels like Dallas is to lose. It kind of feels like that every year, especially the last few years. It seemed like the Dallas Cowboys had one of the most talented teams on paper in the entire NFL. Um, and it just seems like they don't ever really perform up to par or the standard that everybody kind of gives them, or the standard that they kind of have always give themselves. So it's theirs to lose. Everybody always brings up how they haven't won a Super Bowl since the 90s. So it's kind of their time to prove everybody wrong. I mean, if not now, when? They have they probably have the most talented team they've had in recent years, and that's crazy to say because they were good. They've been good for the past 3 or 4 years, and it seems like since then they've progressed to get better every year because they've filled a spot that they've kind of needed. So that's kind of my take on the Cowboys. It's, if not now, when? You guys kind of have to not just be the best team on paper anymore. You got to be the best team on the field, and when you get in those, playoff games, you have to make those plays and win those games. Make the deep runs. I mean, they probably have one of the most talented rosters in the entire NFL. So we'll see where it comes with the Cowboys. For me, it's tough choosing who's going to come in second in that division, especially being a Giants fan. I want to say it's them. And I will say it's them because a lot of people aren't really giving them a chance this year. But I do think they're going to surprise some people. I really do have a high standard for the Giants. It seems like with this new coach, Joe Judge, who's preaching physicality, versatility, he's just preaching that, we go out there and we play like physical football. It seems like these players are buying into it. And that's kind of the biggest thing when it comes to coaching, it seems like in the NFL or in sports in general, especially with a new coach. You need your players to buy into what you're selling them. And because if they don't, they're not going to want to go out there and play for you. And it seems like every single player out there wants to go out there and play and give everything they do for Joe Judge. I mean, the talent might not be there because they are young. A very young team, probably the youngest team we've seen from the Giants in years. But the versatility is there, especially, Joe Judge coming from New England and, coaching under Bill Belichick. He knows, and Bill Belichick kind of gave him praise. He knows how to maximize talent, just like he does what Bill Belichick does, and that's maximizing talent. He's going to go out there and he's going to put guys in spots in which it's going to benefit them and the team the most. And he's not just going to put guys in spots because it says that's where they play on paper. He's going to put guys where it's going to help the team out. And that's kind of what's got me excited about the Giants is all the, acquisitions they've gotten, like Blake Martinez. These are guys that have the versatility to move around and play, in the passing defense and also in the rushing defense, especially guys like Xavier McKinney, who we just drafted, obviously is injured, banged up. Hopefully get back soon. But, I'm expecting a pretty decent season from the Giants. I'd give them a ceiling of 10-6 and a floor of 6-10. People are going to think I'm crazy, but honestly, the 3 weakest spots on their roster, they drafted or acquired during free agency. We've seen them go for O-line and three O-line picks, 3 DBs, and 4 linebackers within the draft and free agency. So I'm pretty excited about that. They got their leading sack man from last year, and Marcus Golden. Daniel Jones had a fumbling problem, put on a lot of muscle, and was doing a lot of drills in the offseason for specifically his fumble problem. So this got me excited for the team. We obviously know what Saquon Barkley is capable of, with a little bit more revamped O-line. I'm hoping that we can see what we saw from Saquon his first year. Obviously, he wasn't healthy last year, or as healthy as we wish he would have been. But now with that O-line, We've got a decent receiving core. No true number one wide receiver, although we do have Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard, which is a decent duo. With the threat of Saquon Barkley, the better O-line, hopefully giving Daniel Jones more time to throw the ball. I think we can expect some pretty good things from them this year, and they might surprise some people. Like I said, the ceiling for them is 10-6, and they could actually scoop up a wild card, in my opinion. It depends on how physical they come out and how well they play. And honestly, they have some tough games. They have the games against 49ers, games against the Seahawks, a game against the Cardinals, which is another good young team, which will be a good test to see how, progress we actually are thus far. So for me, that's the keys of the Giants is Daniel Jones, our secondary, and our O-line. If that O-line, that revamped O-line can, with the depth they have, can protect Daniel Jones, who I know can throw the ball, and if that secondary can hold off, some of those big name wide receivers in the NFC East, like Amari Cooper, and Deshaun Jackson, who we know obviously isn't who he used to be, but who has the potential to go off on games, especially with his ability to stretch the field. So for me, those are the biggest questions on the Giants. It's not the lack of talent, but more so the fact that they are unproven. So for me, that's really the Giants are a big question, and so we'll see how well they can do with the young talent that they have, and if guys are put in better positions to win with Joe Judge and his ability to kind of find the right spots for players. With that, I'm going to move on to the bottom half of the NFC East, or at least what I believe is going to be the bottom half of the NFC East. And that starts with the Eagles. I gave them a ceiling of 10-6 and a floor of 6-10. Philly coming in had high expectations from a lot of people. They're a very talented team. They have been for years. But the injury woes kind of already started, and that's a problem that Philly seems to struggle with every single year. Last few years, it's been Carson Wentz. It seems like Carson Wentz's injury has been an issue almost every year since he's arrived. He can't seem to stay healthy and on the field. Obviously, he's been healthy thus far this year. I mean, we haven't seen any action. Week 1 is actually today. But he usually can't stay healthy, and now that he has, it almost seems like now he doesn't have the weapons to throw to now that he's healthy. They got Jalen Reagor because they didn't really have a true number one, and Jalen Reagor is now out with a shoulder injury, alongside Alshon Jeffrey, who is also out with a foot injury. So that's going to be tough. They're going to rely heavily on Deshaun Jackson, who, like I said, isn't what he once was, but that's who they have to rely on now is kind of Deshaun Jackson stretch the field with, Miles Sanders, who is also out, at least expected to be out week 1 with a hamstring injury, which we know can be a nagging injury. Marquise Goodwin, who they got to help them on the offensive side of the ball, opted out due to, wanting to protect his family, having had issues in the past with, miscarriages. You kind of have to understand that. Having had his first child in the off season, it's something that he doesn't want to risk. And so now that they have Carson Wentz, who is healthy, he really has nobody to throw to. And it's kind of also a question on whether or not his offensive line is going to be able to hold him upright. Andre Dillard, left tackle, he was out with a torn bicep, and Brandon Brooks, who also has an Achilles injury. It's always been a problem with injuries, no matter how talented they've been, and it kind of seems to be like the same story already this year. And so it's going to be tough for the Philadelphia Eagles to overcome these, huge injuries in those key positions so early on in the year. I mean, it's so important to start seasons off on a positive note. and off on the right foot. So with those injuries, I mean, you kind of got to wait and see how, the Philadelphia Eagles answer to that, and how they overcome that, and whether or not they can overcome that so early on in the season. And if they can't, hopefully when they get some of those guys back, are they going to be able to make up that difference for what they lacked early on in the year? Their defense isn't really a concern. If there was, with all the concerns they do currently have on their team, all the injury woes on the offensive side of the ball, obviously we know they have Dick Barnett, Vinny Curry, Fletcher Cox, Duke Riley. Secondary was always an issue. Now they have a pretty young, promising core with Darius Slay, who they acquired in the offseason. So now their biggest concern became obviously less of a concern with that Darius Slay signing, because their DBs have always been suspect in the past few years, and we've seen it. So there's just a lot of questions around the Eagles, and that's why I kind of have them finishing very closely, either second or third with the Giants. I give them both a similar floor and ceiling, but I just went with the healthier team. Like I said, that's really in the NFL. It doesn't matter how talented a roster you have, which the talent is there for Philadelphia, and they do have more veterans, an older team than the Giants do. So typically I would say that they would do better, but it's just, you got to go with the healthier team, because even down this stretch, they say sometimes the best teams aren't the teams that win it all. It just depends on who's healthier at that point. And so, if these injury woes do happen to affect the Eagles early on and they can't figure out a way to manage it early, that might be what the difference is later on in the season that separates them and the Giants from maybe acquiring, like I said, a last playoff spot for a wild card. So we'll see how they respond with the injuries. But right now, Philly has a lot of questions, and I'm just really excited to see, can they answer those questions? Can they prove people wrong? Can they manage to adjust, with the injuries that they have? And with that, I'm going to move on to the Washington Redskins, who, they're good on defense. They're really, really good. Scary good, actually. For me, the biggest question is their offense. But on defense, they have been really bolstering that, defensive line. They have Montez Sweat. They have Chase Young. They're so talented on the defensive line. They got corners Ronald Darby, Kendall Fuller, Aaron Colvin. So I'm curious to see how well that team meshes. They have a really good defensive side of the ball. And actually, Devin, if you have watched our last episode, like I said, if you haven't, go watch that. It's a good episode. We talked about week 1, and he actually chose them as his upset team, spoiler alert, but he did, and I fully agree with that. I do think they'll beat the Eagles in week 1. Like I had mentioned, the Eagles have a lot of injury woes right now, and especially with that offensive line and how Chase Young has been tossing his own O-linemen around, I think they're going to have a rough time trying to stop Chase Young today. So I don't see the Eagles winning this game. Washington might start their season 1-0 and really hot. But it's more so the offensive side of the ball. We kind of seen a little bit out of Dwayne Haskins, but not really. He wasn't really in the best position last year. We obviously know Washington didn't really have a lot to work with outside of Scary Terry. And now with Alex Smith coming back, a lot of people, Alex Smith is going to start. Alex Smith is going to start. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's going to start week 1. He already wasn't named week 1 starter. I do think if he does come in for Washington, it is later on in the year if they don't do as well, although I do believe they should probably leave Haskins in if that happens, or if they're doing good regardless, get him the reps, because I do think he's your quarterback of the future. I think more so what's likely to happen is that a team inquires about Alex Smith a little bit later on in the season. A team that's, a quarterback away from competing, I think will inquire about Alex Smith. And I think that's more likely a scenario to happen than Dwayne Haskins being taken out, especially because, there's not much left you have with Alex Smith. I mean, maybe if you want to compete now, but I think even the Redskins know, even with Alex Smith, they're not going to compete right now. So the best thing for them to do is just to let Dwayne Haskins get reps, whether they're good reps or bad reps. All reps are good for him at this point. It's only his second year. So, the Redskins are in rebuild mode. There's not really much to expect from them this year, other than that defense, which I said, it's very scary. So that's why for me, I gave them a ceiling of 9-7, because obviously there's always that possibility of them performing better than anybody really gives them credit to. But their floor for me is 5-11. That's realistic. That honestly, in my opinion, they should be happy if they do come up with 5-6 wins this season. But they are on the up and up, and it's a team that I feel like could be good, given another few years. Acquiring obviously more talent through the draft and acquiring more free agents, obviously giving Dwayne Haskins more weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and getting more key players in those skill positions. They could be a very good team down the road. I mean, they have their QB of the future. They have a great defense. They have a decent O-line, but it's mostly just skill positions and kind of obviously just filling in the depth and things like that. So if the Redskins can manage to get 5 or 6 wins this year, like I said, I do think they'll get week 1. If they can manage to get 5-6 wins this year, they should consider it a pretty successful season. They get to see their young talent perform pretty well, and they're gonna get a lot of good reps against a lot of good teams, specifically the Ravens, the 49ers, the Seahawks. So I'm excited to see kind of what the future holds for the Redskins, because that for me is more so what I'm gonna look for this season when I watch them. Is all right, this is what they got for the future, especially considering I'm a Giants fan. I get to see who we get to kind of play for, the next 10 years, 15 years. So that's more so what I look for when I'm going to be watching Washington this year is okay, this team has this for the next few years. And that's really all, in my opinion. I don't see them doing much to make any kind of run or anything of the sort. And with that, it concludes my NFC East. I will be breaking down my NFC South next. So I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back. I'm here with my NFC South, a division I'm actually really excited to watch this year. Probably the toughest division in the entire league to break down. The high-powered offenses in this division makes for some really exciting games, some really high-scoring games. This division is going to be crazy. I could be right about this division. I could be completely wrong, because that's how much a toss-up this division is. With that being said, let's get right into it. I got the Saints coming out of this division. They're the most complete team in the division, offensively and defensively. They're really basically bringing back the same team, and obviously we've seen what that team has done in the last few years. But really for the Saints, it's Super Bowl or bust. Drew Brees is getting to the end of the road. Obviously, he's older. So you don't really know if you don't win this year. I mean, obviously, there was already a possibility of him retiring after last year. So obviously this year, that possibility is even larger. So that's why I say it's Super Bowl or bust. They obviously have a great offensive team with Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. And the addition of Emmanuel Sanders is only going to help that. Especially considering, there really wasn't much offensive talent for them to find outside of those two. I mean, they, did work Taysom Hill and a few on some trick plays and stuff like that. But on a consistent basis, there's really no threat outside of Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. But now with that addition of Emmanuel Sanders, that is definitely there. So kind of like the Cowboys, this is their division to lose almost. They've had some pretty unfortunate results when they've gotten to the playoffs in the last few years. But the Saints just really have to take that next step. I mean, it's tough to say, but don't leave games into the refs' hands. The Saints just kind of got to go out there and take those games. They got to go win those games. I know last year Alvin Kamara wasn't really playing the season fully healthy. And so, like I said, with the addition of Emmanuel Sanders, now Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and then, Taysom Hill, Drew Brees throwing the ball, their defense has always been really good. They have guys like Cam Jordan. So, I think the Saints are destined for some pretty big things this year. I think really the difference this year between last year is, are they going to be able to make that jump from, basically winning or losing that playoff game? Because there's always that one playoff game that they get got. And they really just have to make that leap and go win that game, because that's really the difference between them making and not making the Super Bowl, in my opinion. They're like I say about the Cowboys, it's almost the same thing as the Saints. I mean, they're one of the more talented teams on paper in the entire NFL. So it's just really theirs to lose. They gotta go out there and they just gotta execute what their game plan is. And if they do that, they have all the potential in the world. They have tons of veterans. And they're more than capable of winning a Super Bowl. So they're obviously a favorite in the entire NFL. So with that, we'll see. It's really, when it comes to the Saints, there's not much to break down because the talent is there. I mean, you're really just talking about how talented they are. That's all you are saying is they're good all around. So it's just really up to them to really take that next step and go out there and win their playoff games. With that, I'm going to move on to who I think comes in second, and it might surprise some people. I got the Falcons. I give them a ceiling. The Saints' ceiling is 12-4, floor of 10-6. Now with the Falcons, I give them a ceiling of 11-5, a floor of 9-7. I'm not even sure Falcons fans are gonna believe this at all. Because as a Falcons fan, it's almost like even when they're good, like when they were in 2016, it was just like, okay, like when is this gonna end? When are we gonna be woken up from this dream? When is the nightmare gonna start? That's how it almost always feels for them, because either they're good or they're not, and even when they're good, it almost seems like I said, it just seems too good to be true. Like there's some but there, you know what I mean? Like they're good, but for me, they remind me a lot of that 2016 team. Obviously, the offense is never an issue when it comes to the Falcons. I mean, we know Matt Ryan's more than capable of throwing 4,500 yards every single season. Honestly, he's got a great duo of Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley at wide receiver, and they upgraded at the the running back position. Sorry, with the addition of Todd Gurley, who's also capable of catching passes in the backfield. We've seen what he did in LA. So for me, I mentioned it in the episode. I keep referring to the episode. You have to watch our last episode where we talked about week 1 and our picks for the year. I mentioned Matt Ryan in the conversation for MVP. He always has the high numbers to compete for that award, but really it's tough to win that award if your team doesn't really perform. You can have all the stats in the world, but one of the biggest stats people always look at is record. And so if you have all the stats, but your team doesn't have that record to kind of mirror it, it won't mean much for people voting for MVP. So for me, the biggest thing for the Falcons is the defense. But if anything, obviously other than the Saints, I think they have one of the best defenses that is almost tailored to play against those NFC South offenses. They have a lot of young guys. Mostly, the most, kind of questionable position on their team is DB because they're so young there. But they do have a guy in AJ Terrell who they drafted with their first round pick, who got a lot of high praise from coaches and even Julio Jones, who is wide receiver 1 in Atlanta. So receiving that high praise from somebody like Julio is pretty huge. So he might step up and he might be big for them. But obviously that's their biggest question is DB. But they also have guys like Keanu Neal, who's coming back from injury, who's only played, I believe, 4 games in the last 2 seasons, who's really just a ball hawk who plays with speed. I mean, and that's really where the Falcons make up for where they lack in talent, is just playing with speed. Guys like Deion Jones and Keanu Neal, Greg Jarrett, Takk McKinley, Dante Fowler, Isaiah Oliver, Kendall Sheffield. I mean, the list goes on and on. They got a lot of depth. Really young talent and unproven guys, but guys who are really fast, guys who play really fast. So if there's any defense that's going to keep up with these high-powered NFC South offenses, these speedy NFC South offenses, it's going to be this team, obviously, other than the Saints. And so that's why I'm so high on them this year, is really just because their offense is always there. It was really their defense that's a question, and mostly last year was because of those injuries, and they got a lot of those key guys back, And if it wasn't for guys like DeMarcus in Dallas, who's so talented, and I mean TJ Watt, who's so talented, I'd almost be inclined to say that Deion Jones is a possible defensive player of the year candidate, because I think he has the opportunity to have that really huge breakout year, especially with that, defense that they have in Atlanta. So, I think Matt Ryan's MVP season, bid will only go as far as that defense takes him, and as far as that record mirrors it. So they have a lot of potential this year if they can stay healthy. I expect big things from them, and I honestly think they're gonna surprise some people. I wouldn't be surprised if, like I said, a ceiling of 11-5 that I gave them. I think it's possible they make the playoffs, and I think it's possible that they make a really deep playoff run. But it really is just how far is that secondary going to take them. And for me, that's the biggest question mark. With that, I'll be back with the bottom half of the NFC South. All right, so this is the last thing I have for you today. This is the bottom half of NFC South. Like I said, sorry, a lot of talking. Like I said, high-powered division. So, I mean, this could go any way. These teams could flip and flop all throughout the year. But in third place, I do have the Bucks with an 11-5 ceiling and a 9-7 floor. And for me, there's no questions on offense. We know how good they are on offense. I mean, insanely good on offense. They obviously acquired Tom Brady, Gronk, Leonard Fournette. They already had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Offense is in question. I don't even know if I want to sit here and talk about their offense. They're capable of putting up 40, 50 points, it almost seems like, on any given team. On paper, obviously, it's not easy to score points in the NFL. That's not what I'm saying. But with the talent they have, it's more than possible that they could do it, and it might have one of the best offensive teams on paper that I've ever seen. With that being said, the real question is the defensive side of the ball. Their front seven is loaded. Ndamukong Suh, Shaquille Barrett, Vita Vea, Levante David. The list goes on and on. Jason Pierre-Paul at linebacker. We know what he did in New York. Obviously, he hasn't been as good, but moving him to linebacker was pretty big. He did pretty well last year. So with that loaded front seven, their biggest question is DB. And that's why, for me, I kind of put Atlanta ahead of them, because you can put up as many points as you want to put up. If your team isn't capable of stopping other teams from putting up points, you're going to have a tough time winning games. And you're just gonna have to really sit there and have shootouts and outscore teams. So their front seven is gonna have to manage to get to the quarterback and get to the quarterback fast if they want to win games. Because their DBs, it's really a lot of young, unproven talent. A lot of unknowns, a lot of questions there. They really don't have any true number ones to play in the secondary. So for me, that's the biggest question, and that's why for me, I think I have them in third place, is because out of all three of those teams, those top teams in the NFC South, they have the weakest secondary, in my opinion. And so it's going to be tough with all the high-powered offenses in the NFC South. All the other teams might manage to, stop the other teams from putting up points. How are the Bucs going to manage to do the same thing with that weak secondary? So with that, we'll see. There's not much to go on about the Bucs. Like I said, the talent is there on offense. They have unlimited talent. They have the ability to score with anybody. The question remains how well they're going to play defense. And when they get to when they do get to those playoff games and face teams with good offenses, and maybe not as good offenses as they have, but teams with defenses with the ability to stop their offense from, putting up those high numbers like Dallas, those teams are going to really be big tests for the Bucs this year. Obviously, we got a crazy matchup week 1 with the Saints, so that's also going to be another test because, like I said, the reason I have the Saints as the number 1 team is because they're the most complete. They come with the offense and the defense, and so we'll see. Will they be able to stop, Tom Brady and the Bucs? I don't know if the Saints will, but they have a better opportunity of doing so than the Bucs have stopping their offense. So that's why I have their team in third. And like I said, a ceiling of 11-5, a low of 9-7. 9-7 might be the worst season that Tom Brady's ever had, but it's also probably the worst defense he's ever had in his entire career. So with that being said, I'm going to move on to the Carolina Panthers, who kind of are very similar to me for the Washington Redskins. They're almost a brand new team. Obviously, Carolina's new everywhere almost, so it's hard to judge how well they're going to do. I have them with a ceiling of 9-7 and a floor of 6-10. They got a new QB in Teddy Bridgewater, who we've seen, obviously, how well he did in New Orleans last year when Drew Brees was out, I believe, 5 games, and he actually went undefeated. But we saw what he was capable of in an already high-powered Saints offense. Carolina's not as high-powered. Outside of CMC, who is obviously their biggest threat, they don't really have a number 1 wide receiver. So for me, that's where I say, are they going to be able to put up numbers? Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater is a good quarterback, but you need to have weapons around Teddy Bridgewater for him to score points. So that's why it's tough. I think this team is in real rebuild mode, but I do think they're a pretty good team. And like I said with the Redskins, they're more a team that when you watch them, it's like, okay, this is what they have to offer down the road, and they have a pretty promising future because I think they do. They need this. They need to surround, Teddy Bridgewater with more weapons. Obviously, get CMC help because outside of him, there's really just DJ Moore, who's not really, in my opinion, a true number 1 wide receiver. And so that's why I say, defenses are just going to get there and they're going to stack the box against CMC. So it's going to be tough for the Carolina Panthers to put up points. But I definitely do think, it's a team that down the road has a lot of potential to do some great things if they do, develop their talent. And obviously acquire more players through draft picks and, off-season acquisitions. They have a lot of potential for the future. They're a very young team. So, giving them, a ceiling of 9-7, a floor of 6-10. Like I said, with the Redskins, Last year, I believe they were 5-11, so 6-10, even 7 wins. I think is a win for Carolina this year. They should be happy if they get 6 or 7 wins because, like I said, this is a team that is on the up and up. They shouldn't be expecting their team to, it's always possible. It's always possible. They shouldn't be expecting their team to go out there and, compete for a Super Bowl. But it's definitely exciting to watch a team like this when you're a fan because you see the young talent that they have acquired thus far, and you're like, we do have a promising future. It's nice when you have a 27-year-old quarterback and, a running back in CMC and a pretty good defense. And, obviously DJ Moore, like I said, is not a number one wide receiver, but he is solid. Like I said, if you surround yourself with some more talent, which I think obviously it's always possible, just acquiring the right guys and just developing the guys you have well, I think they have a promising future. They have the right recipe. They already filled the toughest position, which is quarterback, with a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, like I said, who sat under Drew Brees, which if there's any quarterback you want him to sit under, Drew Brees is one of them. So Carolina fans, maybe your team won't do all that well this year, but I think you'll see this year that you guys do have a promising future. And that's just as exciting to me as, having a good year is when you get to watch your team and you're like, wow, we actually have some good talent here. And it's better to see that rather than kind of just see your team down in the dumps. So with that, I'm going to end my NFC East and South breakdowns. Obviously, these are just all my opinions from what I see. You might not agree with them, but it's just what I see. I'm just really excited for football this year. I appreciate you guys watching this video, my breakdown. I hope it gets you as excited for football as it got me excited just to even talk about, these teams and these divisions. So, with that being said, go watch our last episode when you get a chance. Have a happy football Sunday, and go Giants. Peace.